All right, folks, it is time for me to throw my hat into the ring of this conversation surrounding Doom the Dark Ages on PlayStation 5, physical media, Nintendo Switch 2 game keycards. We have an update there. There's a lot going on, and of course, I am very passionate about this topic, so I'm just ready to go off on another tirade for everything that we've been seeing lately. And so, up front, that is the news. Doom the Dark Ages, PlayStation 5, it's confirmed. This new release from id Software, it only has 85 megabytes on the disc. Basically nothing. They've pulled a Call of Duty here, so you need to install the game online, and that is a huge pain because, as we've seen with Microsoft, and we always have to add this little caveat here of with their own hardware and their own games, their customers do lean very digital. Microsoft has conditioned their customers over time with Game Pass, and so it does skew very digital. And so while I don't agree with it, that's why you never see the kind of backlash or outrage when Microsoft either doesn't ship discs on Xbox or incomplete builds. But when you're doing that on a platform like Switch or PlayStation, now we're seeing more pushback. And so Doom the Dark Ages is the latest one where it's like, oh my God, another huge high roll moment, because most of you know at this point, but outside of the circles of this channel and a few other places that like to really talk about these things, there is still that misinformation of, oh, modern games are all internet required. I kind of love that every time I remind people about Does It Play, the resource where you can check this and see the vast majority of PS5, Switch, and even Xbox games, they can be played and installed offline. Whenever I see this stuff pop up on like Reddit or YouTube or whatever the case is, there's always somebody there now that is able to correct somebody and let people know, like, you're wrong, most games can be installed offline, and they put in a Does It Play link. Absolutely love that. Let's keep spreading that and let people know these things can still very much be played offline as they used to before. You're just copying the game from the disc. That's the only difference. Having said that, you've got Doom the Dark Ages, which is our most recent offender, but Microsoft also did Indiana Jones, only 20 gigs on that for PlayStation 5. There's no physical for Forza. There's probably not going to be a physical for Gears of War unless maybe another company steps in and tries to facilitate that, which I hope would happen for Forza. There's just, it's so infuriating. The other thing too is that this headline comes out, a lot of people are very quick to screen cap an old headline from a few years ago. The Xbox head Phil Spencer very much showing or looking like he's got his foot in his mouth because he's going out of his way to say that he supports preservation. He wants the industry to come together behind preservation. And this is something that I really wanted to at some point cover, which is, I don't know, it's a little mismatched. I think game preservation, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and certainly how you might consider game preservation compared to what somebody else might interpret that as. And to be fair, I never like this sharing of headlines, and it has nothing to do with what you're using that headline in response to. Sure, it looks a certain type of way, but we have to be fair. Like that 2021 conversation, which was when he was speaking with Axios, was not about offline playability for discs or anything like that. He was talking about legal emulation. He actually said, and I quote here, "My hope, and I think I have to present it that way as of now, is as an industry, we'd work on legal emulation that allowed modern hardware to run any, within reason, older executable, allowing someone to play any game." So there was that. There was also a very recent comment from this year, back in February, where Spencer was talking about how AI models could be used for game preservation, saying, and I quote here, "One of the things we care a lot about at Xbox is game preservation. And I think about an opportunity to have models learn about older games that were maybe tied to unique pieces of hardware, where the engine on that hardware, time will erode the amount of hardware that's out there that can actually play that game. But you can imagine a world where from gameplay data and video that a model can learn old games and really make them portable to any platform. I think that's really exciting. We talk about game preservation as an activity for us, and these models and their ability to learn completely how a game plays without the necessity of the original engine running on the original hardware opens up a ton of opportunity." Now, I think it was the 2021 interview where he mentioned the hurdle is legality. And that gets more into the license side of it, because I would hope most people know emulation is legal in a sense that if you're bringing in your own copy, you're emulating on your own hardware, it's all for personal use. You are totally fine. You are within your means to do that. Of course, you're running into legal problems if you, say, pirate a game, if you try and distribute, you could certainly have these very litigious companies come knocking at your doorstep, like Nintendo, for example. But the more recent quote from Spencer, and really the 2021 one, it's the issue is like it makes sense, it also doesn't, but it has nothing to do with like offline playability of discs. So again, preservation is kind of this all-encompassing thing. In my book, I mean, preservation in actuality is like archiving in a library, and it's something that most people can have easy access to. This is why like it's always a little bit confusing when you see these headlines about PlayStation's preservation team that they formed in 2022. And those headlines came out, and obviously it's the same thing we always see. People read a headline, they see just the post on Reddit, they don't click into the link, they don't learn about what the actual preservation team actually is, and the top comment on all these things is, great, Sony, bring back PS1 through 3 games on PS4 5. Look, I want that, sure, that's not what that team does. The PlayStation preservation team are only there strictly for like Sony's own interest of archiving their own data for their own use, so they can retrieve those things later for whatever they intend on doing as far as marketing, monetizing, making a game. They're just archiving source code, art assets, multiple different builds of a game, certain milestone builds. They're doing all that stuff. And so while it's a cool headline to see they've archived 650 terabytes of data going back to 1994, that's not necessarily something where it's in your interest as far as you being able to comfortably access PS1 through 3 games and having that playable on PlayStation 5. That's not what the preservation team does. So when we talk about preservation, to me, it's like internetarchive.org, or what the Video Game History Foundation has been trying to do for the past 3 years, and that is challenging the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, because the vast majority of older games are still out of print. They're completely inaccessible. You might remember that headline from the History Foundation. And just last year in October, the U.S. Copyright Office denied the exemption that would have made video games accessible to libraries and archives where you could remotely access them for research purposes. But it's the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association, that's been lobbying against that. And let's face it, they're the rights holders, and they're also representing rights holders that are not directly on the ESA member board. But you want to take a guess at who is a member? All 3 of them, Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft. It's in their interest as far as what they're doing preservation-wise. From their point of view, it's a matter of them protecting their games and making the access to such a way where they can monetize it down the road or something, right? They don't want true preservation in the sense that you can remotely access them for research purposes, or they don't want their ISOs on internetarchive.org, and just this, that, and the fourth. That's really, in my view, preservation, but it is still this very broad term, and very much I would still categorize discs that can be playable offline as a part of that. But it's seemingly like when these headlines come out about what, Phil Spencer says, what the PlayStation preservation team is saying, these things are just, they're not related, and they quite frankly just don't seem to care, or at the very minimum it seems like Microsoft doesn't. It is still kind of this echo chamber as far as like it's only these videos, the type of people that would watch these videos, or the core audience that follows up with LRG or IM8bit, these limited print companies. Just there's a certain audience here that is still very small relative to the larger gaming industry. So I'm not sure how much impact there really could be if depending on how much noise we can or cannot make about these issues. But it's just always important to remember that it might not be important enough, and we're certainly not fighting against it in such a manner where we might see a U-turn, but there is a golden opportunity for publishers like LRG, or again any other limited print company, or even somebody new coming to the scene, which there may or may not be somebody that's coming in relatively soon. So that's actually where we can get into the Nintendo Switch 2 debacle, right? Because we are hearing, based on the leaks from Arc System Works, that there are indeed only 3 types of formats that are found for the Nintendo Switch 2, as far as what Nintendo is offering their vendor options to their publishing partners. So it's strictly just a 64 gigabyte cartridge with the full game, and then the keycard format. And that is, if it's true, completely catastrophic. That is terrible news, because it wasn't exactly well known just yet if there was a middle option, like say a 32 gigabyte card, because that's where the rumor derived from, is that with the first Switch, Nintendo offered a variety of card sizes. And if this price rumor is also to be believed, where allegedly the 64 gigabyte card costs up to $16 something, which is a ton of money. So it's really more of a Nintendo problem. I know it's very easy to point fingers at all these different publishers that are opting for the keycard route and going, oh, they're not willing to pay for the 64 gigabyte card. But I mean, it's $16 is a ton of money per copy of a game that you're trying to sell at retail. So, you know, it's really Nintendo that basically killed this potential third-party offline play support because, yeah, these games are going to be printed on PlayStation 5 as well, generally speaking, and Blu-rays are just not seeing that kind of problem. They're not this massive proprietary format that is very costly to manufacture. Blu-rays are like a quarter or something, maybe for Sony, and then by the time a publisher has to pay for it, maybe $1 or something. And if anything, that's what makes it so inexcusable as far as why can't they print full game data on there, and why can't they buy another disc when, God forbid, the game goes over 100 gigabytes like we saw with Indiana Jones. It's like they can't even use the full 100 gigabytes. You could have easily also shipped another Blu-ray with it as well. So there's that rant that's going on. But yeah, the Switch thing, it's catastrophic. We did see for limited run games, they did put out a statement letting people know that for their numbered games, they will be full game cards, the 64 gig cards. They are still partnering with other publishers for non-numbered games, and that's where it's, I would assume, more out of their control because they would obviously choose the key card route. They just have to, in a weird way, as far as like how ugly this business has been with a lot of publishers going under and not selling enough copies of their games. And it's no surprise at all that all these studios are opting for key cards, especially when their bottom line might not be exactly hurt, since this is more of a core audience we're talking about, the kind of viewer that would sit here and watch this rant about physical game cards. Most other people that are playing games, it's still a very big industry. They might not be nearly as privy to this debacle that's going on, and that's certainly evident by the amount of times people still are completely unaware of the fact that games can be played and installed offline. So it is not looking good. And to round out the conversation, preservation again is a very sort of all-encompassing thing, where it's a matter of how Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, what they're preserving for their own interests of how they want to monetize their games down the road to you from their only storefront. There's the offline play for discs and having the full builds on the discs. That's more of a, consumer by consumer thing that's very important to people, obviously, myself included. But there's that aspect. There's the actual preservation of these games in libraries where they can be accessed easily down the road. Spencer actually did make a valid point as far as the hardware we're playing on nowadays, and when it becomes no longer playable, when PlayStation 4s and 5s just get to a point where they're not able to be easily maintained or repaired, because PS5 has an issue where slim models, the pros, you need that online handshake on PSN one time for being able to use the disk drive, and also every PS5 console still has the SSD soldered onto the board, and that's not easily replaceable. So hardware is also a problem. Everything about this, there's so many different hurdles that are keeping us from, being in this ideal circumstance of, easy access, these games in libraries, and your own consumer rights. It's all crumbling apart. And I do want to really drive this point across here. It's the ESA, Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft, which is more telling than anything else. They still, at the end of the day, they're the ones that control how you have access to it. Anyway, that's about it. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation, and I will see you all in my next video. You take it easy.